Okay, so I recently and finally saw The Batman, and it was really good. Now, my experience up to seeing The Batman were that I've seen the whole Dark Knight Trilogy, I've seen little bits here and there of the 1989 Batman movie, I've seen Batman and Robin way too many times than I'd like to admit, and I've seen Batman v Superman. So that was my experience leading up to The Batman. Now, the Dark Knight Trilogy, I loved it. I loved every single Batman movie in that trilogy. Batman 1989, I thought was weird, and I just turned it off. And Batman and Robin and Batman v Superman are not great. So I would say I've seen the must-sees of the Batman movies, and I feel like when I went into this movie, I didn't have the highest of hopes, because there have been a lot of Batman movies in the past that haven't been too great, but I was very much looking forward to this movie. I had heard nothing but great things from Robert Pattinson as the Batman, and upon further inspection, he seems like the perfect Batman. But with his track record, I was still a little bit hesitant because he did play Edward in Twilight, and Twilight sucks. We all know that, and we just need to move on. Now, the movie itself I thought was great. Sure, the movie runs long, but I don't think it hinders the movie at all. I think the 3 hours go by very quickly, and I barely noticed. Now, while watching this movie, I thought, wow, the cinematography is actually pretty good. There were tons of different camera moves, camera angles, that you don't really see in superhero movies, and I really wish there was more of visual flair to many superhero movies, and this movie has a lot of visual flair, and I really appreciate that. I think the way that Matt Reeves shot this movie was fantastic. I thought he did a fantastic job. Let's just say that I never really noticed that shots were very static or didn't have a lot of movement to them. The camera was always moving around, and it just really kept my attention. Now, as for the acting, I feel like everyone in this movie did a fantastic job. Now, I already mentioned a little bit that I loved Robert Pattinson as Batman. He plays Batman as someone who hasn't quite figured out how to be the Dark Knight, or a vigilante, or a hero, and his Batman gave me a lot of Year One vibes, which was probably exactly what they were going for. But his Bruce Wayne is what I find most captivating. He is still deeply traumatized by the death of his parents, and you can see that. You can see the pain behind his eyes. He is super broody, and he's very angry. You can tell that by the way he deals with criminals. He's very violent. He lets all his anger out on them, and you can see that he hasn't quite figured out how to be a hero. Batman, or Bruce Wayne, is very much a vigilante in this movie. But what keeps him from going over the edge is his connection to the police, and more specifically, Jim Gordon. Gordon is the only person in this movie that is working actively with Batman, with no strings attached. It was really nice to see that there was one glimmer of hope for Batman. He wasn't going to be always alone, because he's always going to have Jim. And as long as Jim is in the picture, Batman isn't alone. As much as we may feel that he is alone, there's always Jim. We also have Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, and I feel like Catwoman is always a very underutilized part of Batman's rogues gallery. I liked the version of Catwoman that we got in Gotham, and it was nice to see that they were able to make a grown-up version of that connection between Selina and Bruce. The next actor I want to mention is Andy Serkis as Alfred. Alfred is always a very important part of Bruce Wayne's life. He's been there for him since the beginning, and he will always stick by his side. But In this movie, I don't feel like they gave Alfred much to do. I don't really feel like he was always there for Bruce. I always feel like he was in the background, or just a means to an end. In this version, Alfred is just kind of used as leverage. He's kind of just used as a way to spur Bruce on to get the Riddler. Alfred is just kind of used as a plot device, and never like there's anything to explore with Bruce and his relationship to Alfred. So I feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity in this movie, but I am optimistic that they could fix that in a future sequel. The last actor I want to mention is Paul Dano as the Riddler. I'm not really sure how hard it is to play someone that's insane, but it seems like Paul Dano really pulled it off, and it seems like he was having a lot of fun doing it. As versions of the Riddler go, this is definitely the best version that we've gotten, especially in film. He is very menacing. He is not just a joke or some cartoony version of himself, but he's actually menacing, and he is perfect. In terms of story, I love what they did with this adaptation. I feel like it is a very detective-driven story as opposed to just a average superhero movie. I feel like for years now, people have been nagging filmmakers to make a more detective-driven story for Batman, and I feel like it really delivers here. For the majority of this movie, Batman is just solving a crime. He's solving a murder. He's not really fighting a lot of crime. There are fight scenes, but it's not the focus. He's mainly just solving a murder. There's a lot of scenes of Batman sneaking around places, incognito, trying to gather information. There are scenes of him going to multiple crime scenes and analyzing the crime scene. There's a lot of that, and it's very engaging and very refreshing. There's a lot of, oh, this villain leads to a bigger villain, leads to a bigger villain. So, first, Batman has to find out all this info before he can start taking out these villains one by one, so he can finally get to the Riddler. It's a lot of gathering information, and it's very intriguing. This is why I feel that the Batman is perfect. So, those were all of my thoughts on the Batman, and I hope you enjoyed, and I hope that you go see this movie because it is well worth your time, even though it is 3 hours long, and I hope I will see you in the next one.